Morgan is the subject of our discussion this evening. We're very fortunate to have in our studios Jim Morgan, the brother of the now deceased Lee Morgan, the famous jazz trumpet player. Jim is visiting with us from Philadelphia and is due to leave in just a few days, so we thought we might take this opportunity to capture some choice bits of history regarding famous jazz trumpet player Lee Morgan. Jim, we're really happy to have you here.
Thank you.
I'm sorry that it's so late in your stay that we're getting to you, but better late than never.
Right.
What we want to do tonight is just talk a little bit about Lee and his development, his life in Philly, some of the people that were involved with him, some of the people that encouraged him and were sources of motivation for his development as a jazz musician, and to talk a little bit about the Morgans as a family and how all of that played a part in Lee's development. First of all, when was Lee born, and what was the family situation like, and were there any other musicians involved?
Okay, first of all, Clint, Lee was born July 10th, 1938, the youngest of 4 children. My sister, who was the eldest, was a piano player also. In fact, she still plays to this day.
What's her name?
Ernestine. But her music is basically strictly to the church, you might say, and for our own listening pleasure. You know, she's not into the jazz thing. She probably could play it, but she never has.
I see.
You know, she's been playing, in fact, ever since I can remember, because she's a bit older than we are, and I never remember her not playing.
Did she influence Lee in any direct way, or?
Yes, to a degree. When he first started playing, what few people don't know about Lee is that Lee actually started on xylophone, the vibes.
Is that right?
Yeah, he started when he was about maybe 12 years old, and he started playing the vibes, and he had sort of moved along pretty well on them, when all of a sudden, like, he stopped and he said he wanted a trumpet. And when he presented this thing to the rest of the family, they sort of shrugged it off like, hey, you know, first you start with vibes, now you want a trumpet, what is this? You know?
How far does this go?
Yeah, so my sister, she took it very seriously, and she went out and bought him his first trumpet.
Now, how old was he then?
And I guess he was about 13. And she paid for his first lessons. And from then on, like, he really stuck with the trumpet. You know,
Did he play in the school band?
Yes, he did. He went to a high school in Philadelphia, Mastbaum Vocational Tech, which is one of the finest music schools in the country, probably at that particular time. Bobby Timmons was also an alumnus of that school.
Mm-hmm.
And he went to Mastbaum and majored in music, and this is where he really developed his skills, I would say.
Were there any outstanding instructors at that school that you can recall that influenced
at that
Lee?
particular time, Lee had an instructor by the name of Lee Wire, who was, I believe, a former instructor at Annapolis at one time.
Mm-hmm.
So he was a very fine teacher and really taught the basics.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, at that particular time, Lee had a music teacher who was also an alumnus of Mastbaum Vocational Tech, a trumpet player by the name of Tony Marchione, who was one of the finest trumpet players ever to come out of Mastbaum Vocational Tech. However, again, his skills were not that of jazz, but basically of maybe the classics and just the trumpet itself. He's now music director at the Valley Forge Music thing in Philadelphia, right outside of Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm.
Tony Marchione.
So Tony Marchiano's orientation was more in the classical vein, right?
Right.
Did he influence Lee in that direction in terms of appreciating some of the technical facility that you can develop with playing the classical vein?
Yeah, well, from what I understand, he was a very good teacher of, like you said, techniques.
Mm-hmm.
And this is one reason why Lee had him as a teacher. And he was a very young guy himself. He was only like a few years older than Lee was. But he was a master of the trumpet. He knew the trumpet inside out. And Lee always used to talk about him, you know. And it's just a shame, probably, maybe that he didn't, pursue his skills in the jazz vein.
Ready? Okay, now we're at what, around 13 years old, 14
Right.
years old with Lee, and
Yes.
and Tony Marchionne enters the picture
Right.
and starts to polish Lee's skills. How old was Lee when he really got into jazz and developed his own band?
Well, I would say just about 15.
So he's still in high school?
Right. He was maybe like, a freshman in high school. And there were quite a few really good jazz musicians in Philadelphia at that particular time, like I mentioned before. Bobby Timmons, the late Spanky DeBress,
Bass player.
Kenny Rogers,
Right.
Reggie Workman, Albert Heath.
That's right, all the Heath brothers.
McCoy Tyner,
McCoy Tyner, right.
quite a few of them. Eddie Campbell.
These
and
were all his contemporaries.
All these guys at one time or another played with one another on gigs. Maybe they would switch it up. Maybe one week you might see Lee and Kenny Rogers, who also was a Mastbaum alumnus, playing. Next time you might see Lee and Henry Grimes or Leon Grimes, who were also very good musicians from Philadelphia. Henry was a bass player, and Leon was a tenor player. Very good musicians.
Now, his first band came out of that same high school? Is that the way it developed?
No, not really, because some of those guys were a few years older than Lee.
I see.
Basically, the only one who played with Lee on a everyday basis from Mastbaum was Kenny Rogers, who was like maybe a year ahead of Lee in school. But like I said, Bobby Timmons was an alumnus of Mastbaum High School. So at one time or another, they all would play on gigs together because the talent at that particular time was awesome in Philadelphia.
Well, with the names you just rattled off, there's no question about it. If you had any desire to be a jazz musician at all, you certainly had the people there to influence you, and all of the other artists that would basically force you to develop. It would seem to me, because I can remember here in Los Angeles, it was kind of the same situation with people like Billy Higgins and Charlie Hayden, people like that who would challenge each other really, to develop and grow and become outstanding artists. Let's move on a little bit in time now. He's coming out of high school, and he's already established now as a jazz trumpeter of note, right?
Yes, well, when he was in high school, he played a lot of gigs around the city, and he got a lot of recognition, and his talents were appreciated at a very early age. And like you might say, his reputation preceded itself, whereas a lot of big-time musicians knew of him. People like Max, Clifford, Cannonball Adderley, Dizzy Gillespie, Sonny Stitt. At one time, there was a little thing in Philadelphia, Music City, where all the big-time musicians would drop by, like on Tuesday nights, if they were appearing at the local clubs, and they would come by and play there, basically for the people who were underage who couldn't get into clubs because the age was 21 at the time, which it still is. And a lot of us, including myself at that time, couldn't go into the jazz clubs. So they would come down Music City and play, and Lee had the opportunity to play along with them. So everybody knew him, and like I said, he gained a reputation. I remember one night when he was about 15 playing at a cabaret in Philadelphia where Dizzy Gillespie was the guest artist. And Dizzy came in and Lee was playing. And he asked someone, like, who's playing the gig? And they said, Lee Morgan. So Dizzy said, oh, this is the guy Clifford and has been talking about. So he already had that, that name, that, prestige in front of him, even though he was just a kid, And like I said, he played with these guys on a regular basis as they came in. He would sit in with them and play at this Music City.
Well, with those people coming around to check you out, it was clear that it was just a matter of time before somebody would pick him off and take him in their band. Now, who was that and when did that happen?
Right, okay. He had several offers when he was young,
Mm-hmm.
but my mother wouldn't let him go because he was underage and he was still in high school. So in the summer of 1956, right after he graduated from high school, he graduated from high school in June of 1956, he took a band down to Atlantic City
Mm-hmm.
at a club that is no longer there called the Cotton Club. And what they were like the house band. What they would do, they would play when the regular band would go off on intermission. They would come on and play
Mm-hmm.
in the break. And this band was Lee. He had a little quartet. It was Lee, McCoy Tyner, Eddie Campbell playing drums, and let's see who the other one was. Spanky the Breast playing bass.
Mm-hmm. Now,
And,
Spanky, you've mentioned his name several times now. He's also deceased, right?
right.
At a
yeah.
very young age,
Yeah.
also.
Yeah, Spanky passed around 1974, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But he was another one of the awesome musicians coming through at that particular time.
Well, you're starting off right there with McCoy Tyner,
Right.
Spanky the Breast, and Campbell. I've never heard. It must have been local.
Yeah, well, Eddie Campbell, he played a lot with James Moody,
Uh-huh.
and his career really didn't get off the ground, you might say, in a sense. And he passed early also.
I see. So from that first gig then in Atlantic City, how did things progress in Lee's career?
Well, very good, because before he had finished that gig, Dizzy Gillespie had contacted him about an audition in his big band. And when that gig was over, like around September, I think maybe around Labor Day, Lee went to New York in October of '56 to audition with Dizzy's band. And I believe he replaced, if I'm not mistaken, I think he replaced Quincy. I'm not sure, but I think he replaced Quincy Jones. But in that band at that particular time, you had Lee, you had Phil Woods,
Alto.
you had Frank, you had Paul West playing bass, you had Melba Liston.
Trombone player from Jefferson
Right.
High School here in Los Angeles. Yeah.
Right, you know, it was a very, very good band, you know. You had Charlie Persett playing drums,
Drummer, yeah.
you know. And what happened there was Dizzy, every city they would go to, all the good trumpet solos that Dizzy himself played, he turned them over to Lee to give Lee exposure,
Oh, it's beautiful.
you know. And especially on Night in Tunisia, which was like Dizzy's favorite. Like he gave that solo to Lee, you know, and he would feature him on that particular solo.
So
And everywhere they went, you know, people would get this exposure to Lee. He was only 18 at the time.
yeah, it sounds like to me that could have been really a launching pad or a platform for Lee, having that kind of role to play in a prominent band like Dizzy's. The spotlight was on him all the time.
Definitely. And the thing he once told me about Dizzy was it wasn't only like, you know, the boss and a trumpeter in the band. They had a relationship like a father and son. He once told me that Dizzy taught him more about the trumpet than anybody he had ever been around in a short time. Little things like how to adjust the trumpet to get certain sounds, how to adjust his valves, what to do with the springs in the valves to get certain sounds. Things that probably don't seem like much, but made a world of difference in his playing.
The tricks of the game.
Tricks of the trade, right? And they had a father-son relationship. Away from the clubs, they would go swimming together. Dizzy was a tremendous swimmer, and so was Lee.
Oh, is that right?
Taught Lee how to play chess, you know. So it was like father and son.
Just took him under his wing,
Right.
and shared with him.
Right.
That shows a lot of caring. I've heard other stories about Diz like that.
Oh yeah. Another frontline in that band that I didn't mention, who also was a great frontliner, was Benny Golson. Was in the band also.
Benny Golson, yeah.
He was one of the tenor players in the reed section.
Benny's out here now, and maybe one of these days we to be fortunate enough to get him to come in and sit down and chat with us also,
Yeah,
because
Benny's a great guy.
Benny's got a lot of beautiful stories to tell, and still got a lot of beautiful music left in him. And from time to time, he appears locally. And it's too bad he's not appearing locally right now. We could go down and catch a set, you know.
Right, right.
So let me ask you this. At this point, it sounds like Lee is starting to really be established as a jazz musician. How was he taking this? Was he able to handle it, or was it kind of overwhelming, or what kind of a person was he with this rise to fame and prominence?
Well, really, it was all sort of fascinating to him, and he used to talk about it periodically. But he could handle it because he had a lot of confidence in Lee himself. He had a lot of confidence in himself. He knew his abilities. At that particular time, with him being the front liner in Dizzy's band at that time, he also was offered a record contract with Blue Note Records. That's when he got his first contract with Blue Note. I think he was about 18, and he had only been in Dizzy's band maybe a month when he recorded his first album.
And which was that? Do you recall?
Yeah, it was called Lee Morgan Indeed, and it had Lee, Philly Joe Jones, Horace Silver, Wilbur Ware, and I believe
got heavy hitters so far.
Yeah,
Benny and Benny Golson.
I believe Benny.
Is that right?
I'm not sure about that.
About how many albums did he record in all, during his career? Do you?
Really, I don't know, but quite a few. A few. He has one thing about Lee that he did very early that a lot of musicians haven't done was he recorded a lot of albums early under his own leadership. Most of Lee's albums is under his own leadership.
I noticed that, and going back through my collection, all the dates were Lee's dates.
Right.
Yeah.
So he was very fortunate, to be able to do that early in his career, and this also helped him. And he became one of like the Blue Note giants, along with Art Blakey and Horace Silver at that particular time. They were probably the three biggest artists that Blue Note Records had at one time.
Something else I noticed about those albums was that the drummer on most of them was Billy Higgins.
Yeah, well, Lee loves Billy Higgins. He said Billy had a lot of taste. He was very partial to drummers. I guess maybe from working with good drummers like Philly Joe Jones and Billy Higgins, but he was very conscious of drummers. Even when he was a kid, like he used to use, like I said, Albert Tootie Heath a lot. Who was
he was a neighborhood.
He was
guy,
like
right?
One of the boys, one of the Philadelphia gang. Who worked the gigs with him.
And of course, Tootie's out here now.
Yeah.
And works all the time. Of course, between Billy and Tootie, they pretty much take care of all the jazz drumming work. All the drummers breathe a sigh of relief when those two are out of town because they get a chance to work. Yeah.
They're two tremendous drummers, and
outstanding.
Right.
Two of the tops. Tell me some other things about Lee that are maybe not so well known. What were some of the characteristics that you saw in him as a brother that aren't in the literature, if you will?
Well, first of all, Lee was very good to the family. When he did, become famous, you might say, he never forgot the family. Like he would come home on a regular basis. I remember his first trip to Europe. He came home, I think, at Christmas time. They came back from Europe, and I remember he bought everybody in the family real nice gifts. I remember he bought me 2 real pretty sweaters. He bought my sister alligator bag, genuine alligator, and my mother some shoes. My father a real nice sweater. So he was very good to the family, and on his face, he really, liked his family. He never forgot us. And we were very proud of him, mainly because he was the youngest.
He was the baby.
He was the baby, right.
How much difference in age between you and him?
Oh, about 1.5 years. About 1.5 years difference.
And how many children in all?
4. I have another brother who's 6 years older than I am, and I have a sister who's 9 years older than I am. My sister lives in Philadelphia. My oldest.
She's the piano player.
Yeah, and my oldest brother, he lives in Fayetteville, North Carolina.
Is he a musician?
No, he's not a musician. He's a retired Army man. He's been retired now, I guess, about 12 years. and he lives there.
So out of the 4 children in the family, there were 2 musicians, basically, Lee and your
My
older sister.
Right.
And you just play ears. Yeah. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us about your brother that think we should know?
Yeah, well, one thing about Lee, he was very concerned with the plight of jazz. I remember in 1970, I believe it was, there was an article in Downbeat entitled "Jazz Can Be Sold" by Lee, and what he was saying basically in this particular article was that jazz was really getting shortchanged as recognition and to the general media. Like he said, you could always read something maybe in the newspapers about this or that, but when they got to the jazz thing, they had a little small article that, you know, if you went through the paper too fast, that you wouldn't even be able to see it. Also, the type money that some rock musicians made, you know, which is outstanding, you know, ridiculous, he thought. And guys like, not himself necessarily, but people like Miles Davis, who's been in the business maybe 40 years, who would never make that kind of money. Somebody like Dizzy Gillespie also, you know, who has never made that money and probably never will make that kind of money. This really bothered him. And at one time, I believe Lee, Roland Kirk, and someone else, they had a little boycott. I believe it was on a Johnny Carson show where they sort of crashed one of the sets.
Right.
Yeah, you know, just to prove a point. Nothing violent or anything, but just to prove a point about, you know, jazz musicians. How about, you know, getting somebody like Miles Davis on Johnny Carson show or something like that, you know? And he was very concerned about this.
So the picture that I see of Lee was a person who was not selfish, a person who really did love jazz and played like it, obviously, but also loved his family and had a certain consciousness about trying to further the cause of jazz.
Yeah, you could say that. Also, he was very helpful to other musicians. I remember when Bobby Humphrey, the flutist, first came to New York. I believe Bobby's from Houston, Texas. And when she came to New York, Lee had heard her play, and she was having